Hello and welcome to the Gaming Chronicles. Today we will be doing a character review of Shining Force, The Legacy of Great Intention. Similar to a character tier list, in this episode I'll be just going over the different party members of the Shining Force and doing a little bit more of a detailed review of each of them. I do like the tier lists that are out there. I just felt that to do these characters justice in my own perspective, that I needed to put a little bit more detail into it because I tend to be long-winded anyway, and I think that the tier lists are very informative from like a experience perspective and insight, and this gives more of a full, I guess, explanation of how my experience has culminated into, how I assess the characters and play the game. So, first, criteria. So, there's offense, which is attack and agility combined. It does not matter if your force member has the best attack in the game. If they're slow, they're going to fall behind in experience unless your other characters who are faster defer, because your faster characters will inevitably get more experience. They might not get more kills, but they will have more attacks because they're always attacking every turn if there's a monster available to attack or in range to engage to attack. So that is important. Agility is very important in this game. Survivability. Defense and hit points together. So the only way to mitigate damage really is through physical defense. There's not really any elemental resistance that you can gain or obtain through gear. So it's either defense, high hit points, or both. And then mobility. Movement is key, is very key. Once again, if you have bad movement, it doesn't matter if you have really high attack. If you can't reach the enemies to attack them before other force members, then you're going to fall behind. And then terrain restrictions as well. If we're on a map like that has forests or mountains, even our best force members, once again, will fall behind because they can't move. Rate of stat improvement, that is just how fast a character gains stats as they level up, particularly after they're promoted. So, interestingly enough, in Shining Force, there's an element of RNG, right? The stats that every character will get per level, but also there's this underlying like kind of a model that each character follows depending on their class and just who they are. So like for example, let's take Gort and Luke. Yeah, let's take those two. For example, they have a higher tendency to like get attack and defense because they're warriors, right? They're strong. However, you don't know how much attack and defense they're going to get each level. When they're unpromoted, sometimes they don't get any. And so that rate of stat improvement and chance of stat improvement, depending on class and the character themselves, varies. Your knights in particular, sometimes you'll have a knight whose hit points will increase very quickly as a new promoted paladin, like May. And then you'll have someone like Pale, who has a more like steady HP increase. So anyway, that is important. And then there are some other X factors like evasion, magical weapons, attacking twice, monster aggro, and the timing of things like when a force member joins, when they get spells, what spells they start with, and that stat increasing as well. And then I could have left the rating levels part out. Terrible, poor, mediocre, decent, good, excellent. That's just was for my own reference. And then this review is based off of promoting a character between level 15 and 20. Now, I do not promote my characters at level 10. I think I might have done that the first time I played through. But then I quickly learned that if you defer promotion, you're not really hurting your party. And this is deferring promotion to Ulaanbaatar Fortress. I would not recommend promoting before Ulaanbaatar Fortress, and here's why. You don't fall behind on your weapon upgrades. You know, your warriors, your sword wielders, your knights that wield the power spear. You know, you're not going to get better weapons that require promotion until you get the Warl. And so, Ulaanbaatar Fortress is like the optimal place to promote all of your force members that you plan on taking and advancing throughout the rest of the game. And that's a good place to make your choice. Okay, who am I taking? Who am I leaving? Or benching, really. Who am I putting in the tactical base forever? And then I do have, I guess, I did put together like a parallel, a parallel rating system that's kind of similar to the the tier listing system, SABDCDF. So that's how that looks there. Serious business, always in the party. Bench strength, could do without. Don't bother for frustration, just because that's how I perceive characters that are on each of those levels. So that'll be a recurring like rating key that we'll use throughout any character reviews. Okay, so now understanding the Force before we get into our first character, Max, it is important to understand that one last thing that I factor in is that optimal composition is considered. Okay, it's not smart to have 4 healers and 8 melee fighters. That that creates a very inefficient party. I don't know, you could probably make that work somehow, but your offensive efficiency goes way down, and anyway, you leave some of your best characters out, which leads to your offensive magic users. They really are a must, I feel, unless you're in a map where the terrain keeps them behind, like outside in the forest. Like there's a couple battles in chapter 6 and 7 where I won't put a magic like a mage in, just because they won't do anything. However, otherwise they are a must. Healers become less needed the further we progress throughout the game. In the early chapters, you need them. You really do. I mean, in the early chapters, you get beat up a lot. Like chapter 2, the end of chapter 2 is a good example when you have to fight the Marionette, which is arguably the most difficult boss in the game because of its extremely high stats and powerful spell when you fight it. So there's that. But as you progress throughout the game, and as you get closer to the very end, even the very last battle, you don't need a healer. You don't. It's nice to have one. Like I usually have Chris in my final 12, just because I am lazy and don't like using healing items. But with healing items and with the few what is it, Shower of Cure? Yeah, in Shining Force 1 they're called Showers of Cure in the English version. You don't need a healer. Because your attack power, your offensive power is so high compared to the defensive power of the enemy, even Dark Soul and Dark Dragon, that you don't have to heal a whole lot. It is important usually to have tanks, both for mitigating physical and magical damage, or absorbing magical damage really, because you don't mitigate it. And they should be balanced. It doesn't make sense to have a whole bunch of melee fighters, right? If there's choke points. Have a melee fighter with an archer behind them if you have really tight choke points, or a magic user behind them. And then flyers. Flyers are usually important. You don't have to have them, but they're nice because they gain huge advantages with their mobility. They have no terrain penalties, they circumvent checkpoints, and they don't need solid ground. So, first character is Max. Max, our main character, he washes up mysteriously on the shores of Guardiana, and Lo, I believe, is the one who finds him, becomes his friend day one. And of course, it's not until later we realize he is a descendant of the Ancients, and he's Kain's brother, and a lot of other stuff. But he starts out as a swordsman, very skilled, naturally skilled, much to everyone's surprise. And in the party, he's pretty good. He's decent. He's got good offense. He's got good survivability. Usually, not always. There are some times where I will have him stay back, but not always. That's usually uncommon. He's got good mobility, and he does sometimes fall behind on offense because of waiting. There's the period between when he has the middle sword and gets that long sword, and he kind of that's the one part in the game where he does fall behind, and he's not even in the top 5 of the force because he has that bad weapon, and his stats aren't really going up very much like they do when he's promoted. And of course, he's targeted because he's the main character. Now, when he becomes a hero, he has some of the best offense in the game. He's got good agility. His speed increases very quickly. It doesn't get up to be super high. I think it becomes around 55. What did I put? 50, 55? Yeah, that's accurate. But it gets there very quickly. Like, he has 50 agility by the time he's level 10 sometimes. Like, he sometimes gets all of his speed up front in the first 10 levels. It's crazy. Or close to it. But anyway, he's got really good offense, and his survivability and mobility just get better because his defense starts to go up. He gets the white ring. The white ring can only be equipped by Max or healers. It doesn't make sense to put it on a healer, so it always goes to Max. And so that gives him kind of not a natural boost, but just there's no one else to give it to. So it's just like, give it to Max. And he becomes a wizard. The Sword of Light and the Chaos Breaker both can be used indiscriminately to cast spells. Bolt 2 on the Sword of Light and Freeze 3 on the Chaos Breaker. And they don't ever, they don't ever break. They can't break because they're like key items to the game, so they can't break. So you can just spam the used item as much as you want if you don't want to put Max up in the front lines. And they are the 2 best weapons in the game, the Sword of Light and the Chaos Breaker. But he still gets targeted by everybody. So anyway, but he gets he gets the rating of always in the party. Even if we could bench him, I wouldn't, because he's one of the best. Alrighty, Luke or Lug of Guardiana. So he is he looks like he's kind of a young man. I think he's actually in his 50s or 60s. He's a very experienced warrior, and I find that interesting. And he's I typically always have him in the party. He's always got good offense, good survivability. He's got movement of 6. He's with us from the very, very first, so it's easy to level him. And even in battles where he may not be able to always get into the fray, it's okay because he is since he's always there. He'll catch up eventually. Excuse me. Promoted to Gladiator, and he just gets better. He has some of the best defense in the game, and in the little stat area, I've kind of color-coded them according to, I guess, not really how they're tiered, but how good they are in my perception. Like his HP. That's okay. That 60 to 65 range, that's okay. He can take a hit for sure, but he can't take a lot of damage from spellcasting. He can take a couple hits from those Torcheye lasers, but that's but that's about it. But his attack and defense are always good, always solid. They don't just and those are the ending stats. Like with Max, going back here to Max. Those ranges that we see on the HP, attack, defense, agility, and movement, those are typically that's typically the range that those statistics end in. So between 70 and 75 for health for Max, 80 and 85 attack. He usually has the best attack for me in the game, and then defense between 65 and 70, and agility between 50 and 55. Now Luke, we see, yeah, his agility also is a little low. So he's kind of, and in the later chapters, like chapter 7 and 8, especially 8, he becomes kind of like I don't know, he kind of mops up what's left over on the battlefield. Or since he'll usually go last in the force, I'll put him in a position, because he'll still go before most of the enemies, unless they're spellcasters. But put him in a position ahead of everybody, so that on the next turn, if we're advancing against enemies, they can like leapfrog over him. That even makes sense. And of course, when he's a gladiator, he gets the Heat Axe and the Atlas, which both have Blaze spells. Heat Axe has Blaze 2, Atlas has Blaze 3 that you can use, and you can get as many Atlases as you want, because there's that battle. Same thing with Heat Axe. Both of them drop from an enemy. And every time you egress and fight that same battle, excuse me, again, and defeat that same enemy again, the Atlas will drop. And so you can get as many Atlas axes as you want. Alright, moving on to Ken. Ken we could do without. Now as we can see, his ending stats, they're not bad. They're actually just fine. Those are actually just fine stats for a knight. He's as good as anybody else, really. He is a member of the Guardian Royal Guard. That's something that I think only the Japanese version outlines. And he's a young knight in training. And in the party unpromoted, he, one thing he does have going for him, he joins us from fight number 1. He gets the power spear. Like, that's one of the things that the knights, it's kind of like the knights would all be benched if it weren't for that power spear. Decent mobility, of course. Excuse me. And otherwise, though, he's kind of mediocre. Mediocre offense, mediocre survivability. He kind of gets high health, but his defense is bad usually. He takes a lot of physical damage. So it's usually better, I find, if you want him to tank, make him a magic tank, like some of those dark mages that have Blaze 2. Put him in a way that they're going to cast Blaze 2 on him, because he can usually absorb 1 or 2 of those quite easily and survive. Now when he's a paladin, his levels, or the statistics that he gains per level, starts out slow. I kind of subdivide their promoted levels between 1 and 10, and then 11 to 20. And in those first 10 levels, between levels 1 and 10, his stats, they don't grow very quickly. I mean, you could still keep him in. They don't grow so badly that it's like, oh, I gotta take this guy out. It would be a struggle, but you can leave him in. And it's not until the end, those late levels, like between 15 and 20 even, that he starts getting those really big stat increases. They spike almost as much as Arthur's do. But not quite. But he still usually gets good stats. They're just fine. If you want to keep him, you kind of have to grit your teeth through it, because his stats don't truly get good until chapter 8, at the very end. All right, and then Dao, she is serious business. She is quite powerful. Not only does she have fire magic, which and magic users, at least on the Force in particular, are insanely powerful in this game. So just by default, if you're a magic user, you're at least, you know, a B tier, if you will. Yeah, one thing about her that she was she was an aide, I think, to Princess Henri, and she started to teach herself magic, and then she started to study. And I think that according to either the compendium or I think the World Book and the compendium are the same things, or the manual, she was about to go to Monarena before the conflict with Runefoss broke out, and she joined us. And she's with us from the first fight. She's with us from day one, and she typically has a pretty high initiative or high agility. And her blaze spells, the levels of her blaze spells increase pretty quickly relative to the enemies of the game. Like she gets blaze 2 at level 4 or 5, then she gets blaze 3 at level 11 or 12. Can't remember, but anyway, her blaze spells, the levels increase fairly quickly, and up until she gets when she gets blaze level 4, she can pretty much nuke anything in one hit at that point, except for bosses. But she does have terrain penalties and she's squishy. But otherwise, yeah, she's excuse me, she's a force to be reckoned with. And then when she's a wizard, that's when she gets, the blaze level 4. Usually she has blaze level 3 by the time before she's promoted, since I usually take her to level, probably level 16 or 17. And then she gets the boost spell, which in Shining Force 1 is the same thing as the attack spell in Shining Force 2. And the attack spell or the boost spell is very, very useful for many reasons. But like there's the boss fight with Kain, for example. If you put boost on like Xylo, Guntz, and let's see, whoever your most powerful paladin is at the moment, who you put that halberd on, you boost those 3, and the battle's over with Kain. Like, they'll take him down easily. That's how powerful boost is. Or like when if you choose to level blue, and Tau, she probably is going to get or gain levels before everybody else, because her speed or her agility, it increases very quickly. The sad thing is her end game statistics, as is indicated, they don't get super high. Like her agility, I think usually stays at under 50. Is my experience, but it just gets there really fast. Like by level 10, she's gotten over 40 agility by level 10, and so she gains her agility quickly, so that she is, the first. Excuse me, the first in those battles, or the battle turns. Now her magic point pool is the thing that makes her truly the most, maybe not the most valuable, but super valuable. So Blaze level 4 only costs 8 magic points. Typically, when I play through with Tau, she has over 80, so she can cast 10. Typically, in one battle if she needs to. Rarely is a battle ever. Rarely ever how am I trying to get this out of my mouth? Rarely is she ever casting 10 spells per battle, and so she never runs out of MP ever, unless she has to cast like boost. Boost is expensive. Boost is like 15, I think. Anyway. The only downside I think about Tao is that her HP stays pretty low until the last few levels, like in the 20s low. Her MP just skyrockets, but her HP stays like in the 20s and 30s until she gets those last few levels, and then it like just explodes for whatever reason. But anyway, yeah, Tao is great. Hans, the delicate flower. So Hans is a pacifist. Hans actually doesn't like fighting. In the English version, he says he doesn't like being hit, but in the Japanese version, he's like, I don't like fighting, but the king ordered me to come, so here I am. So he doesn't even want to fight. He doesn't even want to be here, and it is evidenced highly in his offensive power, which is basically non-existent. He's got terrible offense. His stats barely go up. Whether it's unpromoted, well, promoted, no, they do, but unpromoted, it's like you go 5 levels and then he gets an increase, and the where he gets nothing, and then he gets like speed by 1. It's very frustrating. I almost gave him an F forever frustration, but he does have his uses. In the very first few battles, or the first chapter especially, his range or ability to attack behind a melee fighter is useful, but otherwise, he only has 5 movement. He has statistics that barely let him survive, and yeah, a feather duster with a bow is accurate. And then when he gets promoted to a bowmaster, his stats, they're not terrible, as you can see. Like that's fine. But like Ken, he gets that exponential increase at the end. So to most, I think Hans is not the preferable archer if you're going to have an archer, just because you have to fight so long with him to see any kind of results. So, and he remains feeble. So Hans, yeah, don't bother. Alrighty. Lo, the friend of Max. Alright, I gave him a bench strength rating just because of his early game usefulness and even mid-game usefulness as a healer. He's got detox. That's pretty important in like the zombie battle outside of Mount Arena, and in the chapel, I'm in Shade Abbey, and of course, since he is a priest, he can level by casting healing spells and healing party members. But otherwise, he's got kind of a slow start in his like MP pool. Squishy, of course, because he's a healer. But then when he's promoted to a vicar, he gets heal 4 quite quickly. And his agility increases very quickly, and it's the same as like Tao. And his defense goes up fairly quickly for, I guess, the place in the game that you are with him. Because usually, if I have low in, his levels are they're ahead of everybody else's usually. So his defense goes up, and I can kind of use him as a tank for some places. So anyway, otherwise his MP pool efficiency isn't great. Like he only gets between 70 and 75 magic points per the game. And he can't even cast heal 4 times. He can't. That's terrible. And then a low magic point pool efficiency as well, on top of that, because of heal 3, and heal kind of becomes obsolete. It's really not needed because of aura. So, and then he's squishy still. So even though, we could honestly give him a could do without rating as a promoted character, because you have Chris and Gong, who at promoted levels are more valuable than Lo, I feel. But anyway, that's Lo. Gong, the Wandering Monk. So I can't remember if he was looking for Max or not when you find him, but he's a half giant. He's been fighting against Runefaust, and I'm pretty sure he was looking for Max. Anyway, doesn't matter. What does matter is that he's a monk, and his class was definitely improved upon in Shining Force 2, but the concept of being able to fight, tank, and heal all in one, but not, super good, was a nice concept, but it kind of fell flat on its face. So, because there are a lot of moments where Gong is great, because he just had a level where his attack increased by 5, but then he goes 4 or 5 more levels and then his attack does nothing. So it's like, he doesn't really excel anywhere. When he's promoted, he has decent offense and defense, but his attack isn't really high, and his offense isn't good enough that he can, outright replace a fighter. Even though he gets aura, which is a plus for him, it's limited to level 1, and he starts to, plateau and fall behind a little bit. And so I think I was actually generous when I gave him a bench strength rating. I think it would be more appropriate to give him a could do without rating. But yeah, his stats aren't terrible, as we can see. His HP is typically between 60 and 70, in my experience. Of course, these are all relative to my experience. MP between 45 and 50, attack between 60 and 70, and defense between 45 and 50, and agility between 50 and 60. Alrighty, Gort, the Great Warrior. He was once, very renowned, and he fought all over the world, and yeah, and he lives up to his name. He's good as a warrior. He's good as a gladiator. I think the way it goes is he's a little bit less powerful than Luke, but only by a couple of values. Like, his defense might be 72, Luke's might be 75. It's a small difference. Same thing with attack. It seems that his health is a couple points more, but like I said, it doesn't matter. Him and Luke are so very similar that if you're trying to pick and choose between one or the other, you kind of have to strain at a gnat on that. It helps that he joins early, after the second battle, chapter 1. And then when he's a gladiator, he gets same thing as Luke, the Heat Axe and the Atlas Axe, and then he does have the same, I guess, cons against him. Agility is kind of low, so he's usually towards the end of the turn. Mei. Now, she is a much better knight than Ken. One, because when she is a knight, she gets good survivability, along with joining early. Her offense is fine. And then when she gets to become a paladin, her stats increase quickly, especially her health. Her HP goes up very quickly, which makes her one of the best tanks, especially like in the Kain fight, right? I usually have her tank in the Kain fight in Draconia, and so her survivability is quite good, especially in the first 10 levels of being promoted. Between level 1 and 10, at level 10, she's typically the best paladin. And so there's really no contest of who's the best knight until you get past level 10. And so even though her actual endgame statistics aren't so amazing, they just get there quickly, and so you don't notice that, like, for example, most of the knights have around the same defense at the end of the game. But the fact that Mei, and then same thing with health. Health isn't all that different among all the knights, but Mei's health gets to that point so quickly that it seems like, oh, Mei's a better tank, but not really. If you consider that most of your knights are similar, if not the same, at the end of the game, except for Arthur. Now, I do typically give her, like, if she is in, I give her the Devil Lance and the Evil Ring, just because that seems like it's most effective. everyone has their preference in that one. And then I think going back to Ken, I think Ken has the Valkyrie if he's in, but he's never in. Chris is next. Chris is a priest who is very squishy. She's actually unpromoted. She gets I would give her a bad rating. Like, it's like, don't bother almost. The fact that you have to have her in the party is her saving grace, because she comes and joins the party before you have 12 members, and so you have to keep her in, which forces you to either put her in the back and do nothing with her, or heal and level with her, which is very beneficial because for my playing experience, she becomes the best healer. She gets Aura 2, she gets Quick, which increases defense and agility, and even though she doesn't have Aura 4, if we have to use Shower of Cure, we can, but rarely we don't need to use Shower of Cure or Aura 4 even. And as a newly promoted character, her defense and speed increase quickly, and she becomes kind of a tank in the kind of up until chapter 7 or 8. And then of course she does get terrain penalties, which makes her fall behind on outside maps in the forest. But otherwise, she's always in the party. Chris is very good. If there is a healer who I have decided to take to the Dark Dragon fight, it is usually her. In the chronicled episodes, though, I did take Torasu just because it's rare that people take him because he's so hard to level. Not hard to level, but it takes so much time to level him. But otherwise, I would have Chris in if it wasn't Torasu. So just an FYI on that. So now to Anrai, Princess of Guardiana. She is serious business. I've heard many argue that she is the most powerful character in the game, and rightly so. She is a powerful offense than typically anybody else, and it is because of the timing of when she gets her spells. So she gets Blaze, she gets Freeze, she gets Bolt. Freeze she gets to max level 4, Bolt to 2, Blaze to 2 even, and she's in that original 12. She comes early. And so, even though, you know, those first 2 levels are kind of rough because her survivability is very, very, very bad, once she starts gaining levels, gaining MP, she becomes quite a force to reckon with. Now, when she becomes a wizard, she is even more powerfuler. I would argue that she has the most overall powerful offense because she has that super powerful Freeze 4 spell, she has Bolt 2, and she has the most, she has the best MP pool efficiency. So Freeze 4 costs 10 points, Bolt 2 costs 15, I think? Yeah, costs 15. And so, typically I would say, on a heavy casting battle, she casts 2 Bolt 2s and then 5 Freeze level 4s. And that's a lot of magic power. And only she can do something like that. So anyway. And she has, you know, good speed as well. And her defense, even though her defense ends up the same as like Tao's and Aleph's, it increases quickly. So between levels 1 and 10, she's kind of hard to kill. She becomes kind of tanky. It's only in those later in the later levels or later battles, her defense, you know, evens out or plateaus out. But at that time, her magic is so powerful that it doesn't even matter. Enemies can't get close to killing her because she just zaps them with Bolt or Freeze. So yeah, and I do take her out, same as Tao, if there's those like forest and hills battles. Alrighty, Arthur, oh man. Arthur is our labor of love. I'm sure that many Shining Force players can resonate with that. as you can see, one of my pros is that he can survive until level 20. He really can. And otherwise, he's like a D or an F tier. And it's because of the time investment that it requires. You have to work with him. Um, you have to defer attacks so that he can get attacks in. You have to make sure that he's not going to die to a random mage. And he really is the worst knight until almost level 20, unpromoted. And then even when he gets promoted, the first 10, 12, the first 13 levels, I would say even, are not fantastic. But those last half dozen levels or so, he starts gaining huge increases. Like, he gets stat increases +8, +9, +12. But it's all within the last like half dozen of levels promoted that happens. And so it's a case where you don't expect it to happen because his statistics are so terrible. But I don't know, it just feels like that the developers really were trying to I don't know, make you earn the best character in the game, because really, look at his stats. They're amazing. He's got good health, he's got good attack, he's got good defense, he's got the best agility typically in the game. He always goes first at the end of the game if you have him there. And so I usually give him the Valkyrie to just lay waste to everything. However, that time investment makes him lose a lot of that utility, and I would argue that most players don't even like to bother with that, and so that's why he kind of has a split rating. It's either like don't bother, or if you're going to commit the time, and if that's not really a factor to you, then he's a serious business character. Like, he's one of the best. He is the best. Excuse me. He is the best physical fighter in the game aside from Max. So, anyway, that's Arthur. Our dichotomy. Alright, Balboroy and Aemon. I put them together because they are intended to be in battle as a team. That was that in the World Book or was it in an interview? I don't remember, but they are intended to be in the party as a team. And even if that wasn't the intention of the developers or the game design, they are definitely better as a team. Because individually, as we can see, their statistics, especially their attack and defense, are pretty mediocre. But they can fly, and they have a movement of 7. And they have good agility. As you can see, Aemon has very good agility. Now, her statistics are usually a little bit better than Balboroy's in my experience. And I find these two very interesting because I've watched videos of other players, rate these two, and typically other players will say that Balboroy is better. In fact, there was one video that I watched where Balboroy was his favorite character and considered Balboroy the best player or the best force member. And I find that cool because I personally like Balboroy. I like having these two in the party. They have high agility, and they gain that high agility quickly once again when they're promoted. And so they are very effective in as a pair, gaining up on isolated enemies that are hard to reach, like archers or flyers, enemy flyers. So they're very valuable, and they're very good as bench strength force members. And almost they were kind of on the cusp for me between bench strength and always in the party. The reason they didn't get that, that A tier for me is because you really do need both of them in. By themselves, they're fine, especially with the Doomblade. With the Doomblade, they're, they do fine. But if you have the Sword of Darkness on, well, either of them can equip the Sword of Darkness. But if one of them has the Sword of Darkness and one of them has the Doomblade, and that Sword of Darkness is not trolling you with that curse, oh man, they can just rip apart the battlefield. Now, allegedly they have high evasion, and my experience with this is not consistent, although I have seen evidence that that is true. That because they're flyers, they evade more. But I don't see it on every playthrough, so I can't say that the RNG or the proc level on that is consistent. It just seems like whenever the game feels like doing it, it'll do that to you. And so so I think that's about it for them too. They are a little squishy. Their HP is a little bit lower, especially Balbaroy's. Balbaroy, I don't know why. I've never seen his health really get above 60 much, ever. Like, Amon's health is consistently better than his, as are all of her stats. But anyway, that's Balbaroy and Amon. The tag team, the flying tag team. Diane, the Wild and Free. So she is Tao's sister. And makes sense, right? Same color hair. They're both elves. But we wouldn't know that in the English version. That's only established in the Japanese version or in the World Book. I think it's in the Japanese version, though. Anyway, she is chosen to lead the life of an archer. And I don't remember why she's in Bustoke. Is it because her parents are the rulers of Bustoke? I don't remember if her parents are the king and queen of Bustoke. I don't think so. Anyway, doesn't matter. What does matter is that she's better than Hans, and her stats, they stay good enough, especially like with the Elven Arrow, her forest mobility. I mean, Hans has those too, but her attack and defense and HP are all better than Hans. And so if you do want an archer in the party, she is the one to have, and Hans is the one not to have. Now, at the end of the game, her stats and Hans' stats are very similar. Sometimes hers are better, sometimes his are better, is my experience. But her stats increase more steadily, and they stay at a higher level longer than Hans does. So that's why Hans has the reputation of being terrible. Is because unless you take him to level 20 promoted, you're not gonna see that. It takes a long time for the time investment into Hans, similar to Arthur, right? Or Ken. Ken is better, because Arthur is kind of a unique case. Arthur becomes, the best horse member, almost. But it's more like Ken, right? Ken and Hans are kind of in the same boat, as far as they're just terrible until you take them to the very end. But Diane stays decent enough. But she still, I could do without, because she's like, situationally, yeah, she has value, but other than that, nah, don't need her. Xylo, champion of Vostok. Xylo is fantastic. He's amazing. I've heard criticism or negative aspects or cons about him, and honestly, I have not seen them enough. I have seen them, but I have not seen them enough to justify holding that against him. For example, his HP is kind of low. It's like 70 plus for me is a good HP at the end of the game. So under that is like, it's kind of low. Not bad though. Everything else is usually really good. His attack, agility, and defense are all usually very high. He's got really good movement. He doesn't suffer terrain penalties. Just has to go through choke points since he can't fly. And he doesn't rely on weapon upgrades. He's one of the few weaponless force members. He's got good everything. And in the early game, I would argue that he's the best overall character. When you get him in Bustoke after, you make the lunar drink do thing, and you shove it down his throat, and he becomes himself again, those next two battles, the battle of outside of Bustoke in the forest, and that Laser Eye battle in particular, he is the best character for those games, and he just continues to grow in value. Like the Powell Prairie battle, think about it. He just rips things apart. He's got good survivability. He's got high health, high defense, high attack, high agility. And so his stats stay good until he's promoted. And then when he becomes a Wolf Baron, he still has an excellent offense. His attack increases typically to be very good. Same thing with his survivability and mobility, defense, everything. And we don't have to wait for his stats to increase. They just steadily increase as we go along, and he just ends up being very powerful. Now, what I've heard in criticism to Xylo is sometimes as he's leveling up, particularly when he's promoted, he falls behind because he gets bad RNG, and his stat increases are bad. And sometimes I've heard players say that, yeah, Xylo is good, but he's always he's inconsistent, or his stat increases are just bad, or sometimes are just bad, and so he falls behind. And for me, I have not experienced that yet. So I would say for me, he, unpromoted, serious business. He can just go off by himself and start killing stuff. And then promoted, A tier, and he can't quite do that. Promoted just because of the nature of endgame enemies, but definitely always in the party. Alright, Pale. I actually just learned the other day, or remembered the other day, that it's not Pele, but that it is Pale, the mercenary. So I've been saying that wrong the entire playthrough of that game. Anyway, so when you get Pale, he's strong. He's got the best offense and defense, I think, combined. Best overall knight. And so typically, I will put him in. And he will be there until, let's see. I think he replaces Ken usually. The only thing that he has going against him, he's got lowest HP. An interesting thing about Pale the Mercenary is he doesn't remember, according to the World Book, I think, he doesn't remember his past at all. And so that's why he kind of like became a mercenary, is because he didn't remember his past, and so he didn't have any problem, fighting for money until, of course, he met us. Now, as a paladin, his agility gets pretty high, so even though his attack and defense aren't amazing, his HP isn't amazing. Once again, that high agility makes it so it kind of boosts the power of his overall offense, because he's usually one of the fighters who's going first. And I would say he's interchangeable with May or Gunts. I don't know. Just that's usually who I would say, if you're going to take somebody out, take May out for him. And then he usually ends up with the Valkyrie for me if he's in. Now, his HP does increase quickly as a paladin, so he makes up for that. And everything else either improves quickly or steadily until he's done. So anyway, that's Pele. And for me, he's always in the party, or he's or he's got bench strength. I've seen others rate him lower, like kind of like the middle of the road, because at this point we're starting to get a lot of lance users, a lot of knights, and it's just like, oh, another one, Kokichi the Inventor. Kokichi is fantastic. Now, at face value, his statistics don't look great. Low 60s for health, attack, high 60s, high 40s for defense. But he can fly. And even though as a wing knight, he does need support, especially, like he needs support. But he's usually pretty decent, especially with the Power Spear, of course. And he usually has pretty good initiative. He usually goes pretty quickly in battle. And then when he comes to Skylord, it just gets better. His speed increases quickly and it gets high. His stats increase pretty steadily. And if you give him the demon, not the demon, what is that thing? The Devil Lance and the Evil Ring, Like, I usually give those to Mei, but let's say I decided to keep Kokichi in and take her out. He really does become a flying wrecking machine with, if you pair him with Blue, oh, him and Blue, they will destroy everything that's in their path. But he usually does need support otherwise, and he's a good bench strength character. I've heard some say that Kokichi. I've heard some give Kokichi a much better rating. That he's OP, and I think that's because of personal experience with him being able to like evade attacks and be hard to hit. But otherwise, I don't see why Kokichi would get such a high rating from others. All right, Vankar of Powell Prairie. Vankar, who I think this is in the World Book. Talks about his drinking problem, and I wonder if that was like kind of an intentional story connection to talk to the fact that his statistics among all of the knights are the most erratic and inconsistent. He does typically have high health, but he doesn't end with a whole ton, as you can see. It's no better than anyone else's who's a knight. But his defense is typically terrible. His offense is mediocre. And then when he's a paladin, he gets his attack and defense pretty quickly, but his survivability just isn't consistent enough to do, like, put him ahead of anybody else. So he's definitely a could do without. Then Gunt's assistant to Dr. Croc. We only know he's a doctor because of the Japanese honorific that's given to him, Croc-sama. But as we can see, Gunt's, he's got some really good attack and defense. HP and agility are a little low, along with movement. But you give him a mobility ring, and he is good to go. Excuse me, one thing of note, he does not get terrain penalties typically. Like, he can roam the forests, and I think even the mountains he does fine on. And so, if it weren't for that low agility, he would be so much more unstoppable. But even then, it's not terrible. It's not like he's going last. He usually does just fine as far as agility goes. And so, yeah, he's a steamroller. He is a true tank. And his promoted form just looks awesome in battle. So anyway, he's usually in the party for me. I will usually have him in instead of Mei or Ken. And then Ernest, our Vegetable of Vengeance, all he wants to do is get back at Balbazak because he killed his family or something. Of all the knights, he has the... no, he does not have the highest agility. He has really good agility, but it's not the highest. And his agility... So he has very good offense. Very good offense. Defense and his survivability leaves something to be desired. That's both unpromoted as a knight, and that's also as paladin. Knight is a little bit more decent because there's a very big damage curve that happens once like your torch eyes start to show up in chapter 7. But anyway, he's fine. He's viable to take to the end of the game if you want him. But because of when you get him in chapter 4 and the extra work that it would take, it's like, all right, we've already got a bunch of land choosers. Do I really want to switch him out with somebody, level him, and then do this whole thing again? Usually not. So unless you're just a big Ernest fan, he's no better than the rest of them. All right, and then Domingo, the magical creature, hatched from the egg. Domingo has a Domingo is actually serious business to start out with, because Domingo levels very quickly, is a flying spellcaster, which is amazing, and gets that freeze spell, which does just devastates the enemies, right? And so what happens is Domingo's stats all increase up to the levels which we see, the range is there, and Just like Max, though, Domingo gets targeted by monsters. It's like Domingo has the most or second most aggro in the force, and monsters attack Domingo. And then in the later chapters, like chapter 6, I would say chapter 5, chapter 5, but more chapter 6, 7, 8, Domingo's, excuse me, Domingo's stats begin to fall behind. And by chapter 7 and 8 for sure, Domingo becomes irrelevant because Domingo's magic pool efficiency starts to drop pretty low. Granted, he can still cast 5 free 4s or 3s in one game or in one battle, but the survivability is just not there. So, and flying isn't as needed as much in like chapters 8 especially. Like Domingo would be useful to use in chapter 7, but yeah, I wouldn't put Domingo in your final 12 in chapter 8. Alright, Lyle the Wanderer, though not on purpose. So, another tidbit we don't know in the English version is that Lyle was also sent by Dr. Croc, same as Gunts. So Gunts and Lyle were both sent by Dr. Croc to find Max and join the Force. Once Dr. Croc fixed, of course, Gunts' suit, said you need to go find Max in Powell Prairie, and then said the same thing to Lyle, except somehow Lyle got lost and ended up on the other continent in Dragonia. Go figure. How did he do that? Did he get a raft? Where did he find a boat? Anyway, he is statistically, arguably, the best archer in the game. He usually has the highest attack or highest offense because he usually has the best agility and attack. Plus, he's got 7 movement. He is a little bit squishy, though, just like an archer usually is. And before he's promoted, his survivability is terrible. So he cannot get attacked. He's not promoted. But otherwise, always in the party. And then Blue, Descendant of the Sacred Dragons. The only thing he really has going against him is he joins late and he's got 5 movement instead of 6 or 7. Otherwise, his stats are so amazing. He's got excellent stats. And then, and that's even as a dragon. When you get those first couple levels, like he starts with the off level 9, right? And you can either give him the power ring, or you can use boost with Teo. It doesn't matter. And then he gets those first 3 levels or 4 levels, and his stats start to go up pretty well. And then when he gets promoted to a Great Dragon, he just becomes even better. He's got excellent offense and defense, survivability. So he can tank your physical hits, he can tank your magic, he can tank anything. And yeah, he's a flying all-purpose tank. And he flies. If I didn't mention that already. Yeah, Blue is always in the party, and he is serious business, for sure. Alright, Musashi the Samurai. I almost gave him a serious business rating. He is just so good. I gave him an always in the party instead of a serious business, just because of the fact that his mobility is highly hindered. As we can see, his agility and movement are pretty low, but his HP and his offense and defense are just very good. And he's a force to be reckoned with. He doesn't have to be promoted. He's already level 10 promoted, if you will, when he joins. He's already very strong, and he's got good survivability, and and then his stats continue to just go up and make him amazing. So he's always in my party. And then Tosu Prompt, I give him a bench strength rating, even though it's more like could do without or not bother, or don't bother, just because for me, the time investment to grind out a character when I know, if I know that character is going to be better than who I have now in that role, then I will take that person and develop him into the role that I have somebody else in if I know that they're going to be better. And he does have a good MP pool. He gets Aura, an Aura 4. He has good agility, but he doesn't start with the Aura spell. He joins late. He's not promoted. He requires a heavy time investment to for that to come to fruition, if you will. Otherwise, he's the best healer in the game. And then same with Aleph. She gets the most powerful spells in terms of sheer power, yet she comes late, and her magic point. So I made her MP green and not blue because her little 80 to 85, because it's not as efficient as it should be. Her MP usage cannot support Bolt 3 and Bolt 4 every turn for more, for longer than a gosh, let's see, how much is Bolt 4? 20 MP. So if she gets 80 or more MP, she can cast Bolt 3 4 times, and so that's not good. And she's squishy as well. Anyway, so that's Aleph. I usually don't put her in. That's why I give her a bench strength rating. And so she usually stays out. Unless I just want to see Bolt 3 and 4 roast enemies or fry enemies, I just leave her out. And then Adam, Guardian of Matafa. Ah yes, so Adam's conversation with Max in the Japanese version tells us a lot of stuff that we don't find out otherwise. But Adam is a don't bother, borderline forever frustration. The only reason why he doesn't get the forever frustration F rating is because if you do exercise the patience and willpower to promote him and level him, he's alright. His movement is still terrible, but he's alright. All you have to do is give him the turbo pepper or the mobility ring. Yeah, and he does just fine. But getting there is awful. You must use the boost spell to increase his attack in order for him to be able to level up. Otherwise, he can't. Even the ice worms in Matafa don't take more than 1 damage from him unless you use the boost spell. So it's pretty bad. It is pretty bad. Yeah, he's just terrible movement. Just late and unpromoted. He's the last character. Excuse me. He's the last character to join that is unpromoted. And furthermore, excuse me, had to hydrate a little bit there. I think I pointed this out in the when I was playing through the game, is that unless you're like really paying attention, you don't know he joins your party. In the English version especially. It might be more obvious in the Japanese version, but in the English version you're like, okay, is he on our team? Did he die? What happened? So anyway, that's Adam. Don't put him in your party unless you just have to have him. I've only once leveled him up, maybe twice. I think only once. I actually leveled him up and taken him to level 20, promoted, just so I could see those stats. I know that those are accurate based off of comparing my statistics to others that I actually looked up, because I was wondering, I've only done this once with Adam, is this normal? And it seems like that this is normal, those statistics, and they're good. They're just good. They're good. It takes him so long to get there, and his movement is bad. It's just like not worth it, sadly. And then Hanzu the Ninja. He comes to us similar to Musashi. He's already promoted. He's level 10. He has a good weapon, the Doom Blade. Oh, did we talk about Musashi's katana? Yeah, Musashi's katana is one of the reasons why he is so good, and why he has such good attack. Now, sometimes I've changed out his katana with the Doom Blade and like kind of switched him out, but I usually don't. Either way, Hanzu is good. He's got kind of low HP, but his attack, defense, and agility are good. His agility in particular makes it so he's always one of the first to attack. And I didn't put this in the bullet points here, but it seems like he has a tendency to attack twice. yeah. Oh, it is right there. Oh man, I need to get glasses. It's right in the. It is literally right in the middle of the screen. Seems to have a higher chance. I wrote change. Oops, I should have proofread that, but whatever. To attack twice. Oh man, this is just getting long. That's all. And I knew it would be. I mean, we're reviewing 29 characters. Well, technically 30 if we count Jogurt. But anyway, I have noticed that he should be paired with another fighter to be as effective as he can be. If not, it's fine. I mean, he can, like, take care of a torch eye by himself. But generally speaking, I like pairing him with another fighter to be as effective. And he's a little squishy, but otherwise he's fine. And I put him in a bench strength. Sometimes I may have him, and sometimes I may not. It just depends if I want to approach my force composition with the the faster units, or if I want to balance it out more. Anyway, but he's a good character. Kind of teetering on bench strength / always in the party, just kind of on the cusp there. But he's a good character. And then of course Jogurt, he's the mascot. He's just a joke. He's funny but not fun. And that's all that we'll say about him. And here is just a chart of the statistics. I wrote this down and compared it with just so I could compare everyone's statistics easily with each other at the end of the game. And so as you can see, like you've got your knights, May, Pale, Ken, Vankar, Ernest, Arthur. Arthur stands above the rest of them, very obviously, but otherwise, their statistics are similar enough that one of them doesn't just necessarily jump out above the rest. Not really. Like if you wanted your knights to be, if you wanted your 3 fast knights, that would be definitely, Pale, Ernest, and Arthur. If you're going to go with agility so that you can ensure that you get those first turns, then that would be, how to determine that. But otherwise, I mean, defense is all pretty similar, except for Arthur. Same with, attack. HP is not too dissimilar, really. And then it kind of is that way with Gort and Luke. You can see in this, look at that. Gort and Luke's HP and agility are identical. That's crazy. Gunst, as we can see, kind of trades off HP for defense, which is fine. And then Henri, Aleph, Tau, and even Domingo, their HP pool is all about the same. And then, excluding Domingo, their MP pools are not too dissimilar. Tau's is just the best because she has the highest efficiency. And then their defense is all about the same. Like Domingo's defense, that 51 defense, that comes so early. Like Domingo gets into the 30s and 40s in defense so early that it's easy to develop the perception that Domingo is this unstoppable tank. And for chapter 4 and chapter 5 and even chapter 6, Domingo kind of is, and remains that way, because by the time you're in chapter 6, if you've had Domingo in your party, Domingo is probably level 20 already and has maxed out on stats, right? And so defense is in the 50s. And so even your Durahans are only going to be, like the Durahans in chapter 6 are only going to be doing a couple damage to Domingo. But otherwise, they're not all too dissimilar, as you can see. Except for Aleph and Tau's speed. Henri's a little bit behind, but Aleph and Tau's speed is usually very high. Then our healers, since Gong is kind of the Jack of all trades, master of none. Look at that. Chris, Lo, and Torasu all had the exact same health at the end of that game, of that playthrough. And then their agility was all very close to each other. Their defense was, Torasu's was kind of low. But everyone in the, Gong 49, Chris 50. And then our archers, Lyle, you can see clearly that his attack is better, and that's really what he's there for, is to provide that higher attack. But otherwise, agility, defense, health, they're all pretty similar. And then going to Amon and Balbaroy, my experience with them, that is consistent. Amon typically has more health. She typically has more speed, and this game their defense was actually the same. Usually her defense is a few points higher, but their attack, Balbaroy, that's the one statistic that Balbaroy I've found usually has higher than Amon, but it's the only one. Everything else Amon usually has higher. And then of course Kokichi is a little different, but not much. I mean, his attack's up a little bit better than the other two flyers, but is very similar to Amon and Balbaroy. And then you have Blue, the Flying Fortress Blue. And then your non-weapon users, Adam and Zyla, you can see their statistics. They've got excellent stats. And what distinguishes them, of course, is when they join and how much time investment you have to spend grinding to get them to a place where they're viable members. Zylo, since you get him early and he's easy to level, he just is so much better than Adam. And then Musashi and Hanzo, same thing. They're, they kind of trade. Their attacks were identical. Their base attacks were identical. Musashi's defense, of course, and survivability is what he has versus Hanzo's speed. So, anyway. And then my typical final 12. Well, what are they? Well, after max, it's either Arthur, if I feel like, dragging him along. Or usually what happens is when I get Kokichi, I'll replace Arthur with Kokichi. I will keep Luke and Gort and Henri in. And I'll usually keep Chris. 9 times out of 10 I'll keep Chris, and if I feel like leveling Torasu, then I will. But I usually don't. And then Mei. Mei I will usually trade out for Guntz. So my 2 lance users will be Guntz and Kokichi at the end of the game. And then and I would say that's more recent, really. I put Mei above Kokichi on a long-term basis just because I've kept Mei in the party till the end of the game so many more times than Kokichi that she has that spot. And then there's Blue, Musashi, Zylo, Lyle, and then Tao or Hanzo. Usually it's Tao. I found that in Chapter 8 specifically, Tao's power kind of diminishes. That Blaze 4, Blaze 4 cannot kill a jet in one hit. It cannot kill a blue dragon in one hit. Chimeras are resistant to it. What else is out there? Let's see, there's the Steel Claw and the Torch Eye, which Blaze 4 I think does kill in one hit. But otherwise, Dark Soul and Dark Dragon have magic resistance, I think, or do they? No, they don't. No, they don't. So that hits full damage on them, but Blaze 4 no longer remains the huge, powerful spell that it was in, all previous 7 chapters. Henri still stays incredibly powerful because she has Bolt 2, on top of her Freeze 3 and 4. So Tao, I will usually keep her in the game until all the way through Chapter 7, and then when I get to Chapter 8, and I get Hanzo, Tao will go out and Hanzu will come in. And that's probably a very unpopular decision because Tao is still very powerful and very, very useful. But I found that Hanzu and his tendency to attack twice makes him more effective than Tao, just simply put. So anyway, that is my assessment, my character review of Shining Force, the Legacy of Great Intention, and just how I have experienced those characters throughout the game. Yeah, that is the end of our first character review. So until our next character review and episode, so long for now.